Hello and a very warm welcome to an India Today special broadcast. I'm Gaurav Sawant. Our top focus story is Justin Trudeau's announcement that he will quit as the Liberal Party leader and as Prime Minister of Canada. This is the end of the road for Justin Trudeau. He's decided to step down. He's just announced moments ago in Ottawa, he's announced his decision to step down as the Liberal Party leader, and the moment the Liberal Party then elects a new leader, he will also step down as the Prime Minister of Canada. Justin Trudeau, when he became the Prime Minister, he was seen as this golden boy of hope, or the man of hope, about a decade ago. But within a decade, he is being criticized not just by the opposition, not just by former alliance partners, but even members of parliament of his own party for ruining Canada's reputation globally and Canada's economy. Justin Trudeau has conceded that given the lack of popularity or the internal strife within the Liberal Party, the opposition that he faces within the party, he is not in a position to carry the standard of the Liberal Party into the next war or the next election, which is scheduled for tentatively around October 2025, in about 9 months or 10 months from now. But could there be snap polls in Canada? Many are arguing that he is so unpopular, his party is so unpopular that the Conservatives may just steal a march. Now, what was the reason? Was it rising prices? Was it a housing crisis? Was it the clash with US President-elect Donald Trump, who actually called Canada America's 51st state and referred to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau as Governor of Canada, Justin Trudeau? So Trudeau has said he will resign as soon as the Liberal Party elects its next leader. He said, and I quote, "If I'm having to fight internal party battles, I cannot be the best option to carry the standard of the Liberal Party for next elections." I'll get you much more on this big story. Just moments earlier, Justin Trudeau has announced his decision to step down as the Liberal Party leader and as Prime Minister of Canada as soon as his party elects a new leader. Justin Trudeau made this announcement in Ottawa just a short while back. He is to step down as the Liberal Party leader. He made this announcement to journalists a short while back. He said he'd spoken to his family, he'd spoken to his children, he told them about his decision to step down after months and months of internal pressure. Initially, the pressure was from opposition leaders, then his deputy Prime Minister and the Finance Minister of Canada, an aide and a partner for over 10 years in his cabinet, Chrystia Freeland. She put in her papers and cited differences with the Prime Minister on how to handle Canada's economy in free fall. Of course, just moments earlier, Justin Trudeau said he's not in the habit of making personal conversations and public, but he did indicate he was very upset with Chrystia Freeland's decision to resign. He'd hoped that she would continue as his Deputy Prime Minister, but after she quit, there were many voices within the Liberal Party that wanted Justin Trudeau to step down. In fact, in October and November 2024, at least 20 Liberal Party MPs had written an official letter asking him to step down. Justin Trudeau said he will put in his papers the moment the next leader is chosen. He just a short while back said, "If I am having to fight internal party battles, I cannot be the best option to carry the standard of the Liberal Party for the next elections." The next elections in Canada are scheduled for October 2025. But can there be elections even earlier? Before I get you more on that story, let's quickly listen in to Justin Trudeau's announcement.
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process. Last night, I asked the President of the Liberal Party to begin that process. This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option in that election. My friends, as you all know, I'm a fighter. Every bone in my body has always told me to fight because I care deeply about Canadians, I care deeply about this country, and I will always be motivated by what is in the best interest of Canadians. And the fact is, despite best efforts to work through it, Parliament has been paralysed for months after what has been the longest session of a minority parliament in Canadian history. That's why this morning I advised the Governor-General that we need a new session of Parliament. She has granted this request, and the House will now be prorogued until March 24th.
So let's try and make sense of these latest developments. Joining me on this India Today special broadcast is Professor Brahma Chilani, former advisor to India's National Security Council. Yashovardhan Azad is former Special Director of the Intelligence Bureau. Ambassador Vivek Kajju joins us on this broadcast, as does Prabjot Singh, the former Bureau Chief of the Tribune from Toronto. And Prabjot Singh, can I begin by asking you, was this inevitable? It had to happen. The Globe and the Mail, of course, had a lead over others that Justin Trudeau would announce his resignation ahead of the Wednesday meeting.
Yeah, this was like he had no option left, because there was a revolt from within the party. The ministers started resigning, and 30 of the caucus members, they said they are not going to contest the elections when the elections happen later this year. So it means he was losing within the party, he was losing out, and he was losing in parliament. Only saving grace for him had been the New Democrats, who supported him through 3 no-confidence motions. But then New Democrats also announced they will not support him anymore, and they will bring in a no-confidence motion. So he had lost from within the party, especially after his own deputy, the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Chrystia Freeland. She resigned a day before the Parliament adjourned for a winter break. And that too, when she was to present the fall financial statement. Hours before she was to present that statement, she quit. And that was shocking for him, though he had hinted to her a couple of days earlier he may change her portfolio or make her a special thing in to handle U.S.-Canada relations. But she thought Prime Minister had lost confidence in her, and she quit. And that set the ball rolling for Trudeau to move out of office. Yeah.
Professor Chilani, was Donald Trump winning elections in the United States the last straw that broke the camel's back as far as Justin Trudeau was concerned, given how openly he'd spoken against Donald Trump and compared Pierre Poilievre, his opponent, to Donald Trump in Canada?
Well, I think even before Trump has taken office, he has precipitated 2 crises, one in Canada and one in the UK. He has forced Trudeau to quit with his threat of imposing 25% tariffs on Canadian exports to the US. Canadian economy is heavily dependent on exports to the US. 80% of Canada's exports go to the US. So Trump's threat against Canada first forced the deputy premier to resign, and eventually led Trudeau to decide to quit after nearly a decade in office. And at the same time, largely through Elon Musk, Trump has also precipitated a political crisis in the UK over over the issue of
the grooming
gangs grooming, trafficking, and raping young white girls. And all this is happening even before Trump has taken office. It goes to show that that Trump's return to power is going to have profound impacts globally. And this is just the beginning.
This is just the beginning. And Ambassador Kajju, there is a liberal meltdown in more ways than one, sir, literally and figuratively, globally?
Uh, Look, I don't subscribe to large theories personally. I think the fact that Trudeau has gone, of course, to an extent, is because of the scrap, if I may say, with Trump. But more than that, there are internal reasons within the Canadian political system which has led to Trudeau's resignation. Let me put it this way. If Trudeau had popular support within his own party, he could have rallied the country behind him.
Yes.
He would not have, the Canadians would have not allowed the American president to insult their prime minister and their country the way he did. The fact is that Trump got away with it because Trudeau himself was so weakened. So let us not imagine that a genuinely popular leader within any country would be forced to tumble over just because Trump decides that he must open a fusillade against that country. There is nationalism within states, and when nationalism comes to the fore with a popular leader leading that nationalist sentiment, then even a man like Trump has to bow down. It's not. I mean, can you imagine that Trump was to open a front against Prime Minister Modi? Would he succeed? So it is the internal weakness within the Canadian system in terms of for Trudeau which has led to this day. So let us not exaggerate, with all due deference to our expert and for someone I have great respect, Mr. Chalani. But let's not exaggerate Trump's significance in bringing about regime change in various countries.
Okay, but two countries that we will specifically talk about that Professor Brahmachalani referred to, Canada and the United Kingdom. What's happening in the United Kingdom and the Pakistani grooming gangs, we'll talk about that in greater detail. But Terry Milsky, who's a senior Canadian journalist who joins us from Toronto. Sir, Donald Trump's, did he have a role to play, or his comments, did they have a role to play in Justin Trudeau putting in his papers, especially after the Deputy Prime Minister and the Finance Minister put in her papers?
I don't think that Trudeau made Trudeau made a big difference. I don't think that Trump made a big difference in the appearance now of Trudeau. I think that any Canadian Prime Minister would have had to respond to the first Trump presidency and the second one now upcoming in exactly the same way. They have to rally all sectors in Canada to first retaliate against perhaps carefully chosen industries which are pet projects of important Republicans, to include donors to Mr. Trump's campaign. This was a strategy that they did, in fact, successfully employ last time around in the first Trump presidency, where there were tariffs on steel, aluminum, and we retaliated against carefully chosen industries where the pain would be felt most acutely. And secondly, by doing what Canadians can to assure the United States, any United States administration, that we're taking care of problems at the border. We are closing the border to drugs and to illegal immigration, so forth. And so we've got, no doubt we're showing them a nice picture of a shiny new helicopter patrolling the border, so that we're dealing with the problem that you say you want us to deal with as a price of avoiding the 25% tariffs that Trump has threatened. Whether, in fact, that's what he was really after, who knows? We'll find out, I guess. But I don't think that Trudeau in particular, whether it's Trudeau handling it or Pierre Poilievre, the prospective conservative replacement, I don't think that it would make a big difference, because any Conservative Prime Minister who did not do the Trudeau administration was doing vis-a-vis Trump would be sorely criticized about it. They would be required by their voters, by their donors, to do the same thing.
Let me bring in Yashovardhan Azad also into this conversation. Justin Trudeau, he claimed to be a liberal but was seen as a supporter of Khalistani terrorists and in the garb of free speech. Now, countries like India were very clear. Even when Justin Trudeau visited India, the Narendra Modi government was very clear. A Khalistan terror supporter will not be really welcome in India politically, and the relationship was cold throughout. But right now, Justin Trudeau's resignation, with the NDP also withdrawing support, calling for a vote of no confidence, this was the end of the road for him, sir.
I'm not too sure whether the same policy will continue with the new government or not. The foreign affairs specialist would be able to clarify that. But I can tell you one thing, that in the last 9 or 10 years of Trudeau's reign, perhaps he brought the India-Canada relations at its worst. And the kind of things which have been happening, the retraction which came, that the Home Minister himself or the NSA are not involved in that of Niger affair, was something of quite an insult, I would say, to the administration itself, which had held wild accusations all over. And in fact, even after so much of inquiry, so much of investigation, nothing more has come out after the arrest of those 3 people. So I would definitely say, number one, that Mr. Trudeau was a lot to blame for this kind of deterioration in relationship. And I do hope there is some kind of a correction in Canada's thinking with the new government coming in.
Okay, Professor Chilani, you want to respond to what Ambassador Kaju was saying, that Donald Trump would not have been able to take on Trudeau or have this impact had Trudeau been popular within his country. He was hugely unpopular in his own country because of unemployment, rising prices, the housing crisis, and economy being in tailspin, sir.
There is no doubt that that Trudeau was deeply unpopular in Canada before Trump was elected, and that it was only a matter of time before Trudeau was forced out by the party. But Trump's threat of imposing 25% tariffs on Canadian exports to the US became a catalyst. It became a catalyst in precipitating matters in Canadian politics. It led to a series of developments. It led to the finance minister, who happens to be also the deputy prime minister, resign, and that in turn led to upheaval within the ruling Liberal Party. So Trump did precipitate matters in Canadian politics the way he's precipitating matters in British politics.
We are coming to the aspect of British politics in a short while from now, because the Pakistani grooming gangs, and did Britain as a society, as a country, as an administration, did Britain fail to protect their own children from these Pakistani grooming gangs? We'll talk about that in greater detail. But for the moment, Prabjot Singh, I want to stay on the issue of Justin Trudeau's resignation, since that's just been announced a short while back. What happens on Wednesday? What does the Liberal Party do? Who's likely to be the new Prime Minister of Canada? And there is some talk of snap polls. Or will elections be held in October 2025 itself?
You see, the recommendation by Trudeau for proroguing the House, that has been accepted by Governor General. That means the House doesn't meet till the 24th of March. But at the same time, within the Liberal Party, there was Trudeau was losing support quite in a big way. 30 of MPs, they said they won't be contesting elections again under Trudeau's leadership, and also some of the ministers, they also quit. So that put Trudeau in a very tight spot, and he had no choice left but to seek, at least he's got some reprieve for the Liberals to stay in power for till 24th of March, because till then, there can't be any more no confidence motions. They already were the three no confidence motions. And now the choice will be between Chrystia Freeland and Trudeau's choice, maybe Dominic LeBlanc, the new finance minister. So it could be anything, because earlier the former governor, Mark Carney, was being projected as a possible induction in the cabinet, but he refused to join the cabinet. So now the choice will be, because some of the MPs, the caucus, Liberal caucus, are throwing their weight behind Chrystia Freeland, the deputy prime minister who resigned, and after resigning, she didn't say a word. She's just watching the situation, and she is most probably she'll be the interim prime minister, or while Trudeau wants Dominic LeBlanc. Yeah.
Okay. Terry Milski, is that also your assessment, sir, that the former finance minister and the former deputy prime minister could be the next Liberal Party leader and carry the standard to the October 2025 elections? Or can there be elections even earlier?
I think it's a plausible theory, because if you look at the polls, and I looked at another one just recently over the weekend, which makes Chrystia Freeland the leading candidate to replace Trudeau. I think it's a believable poll, although she is only a very few points, only maybe 5 points ahead of Mark Carney, the former governor of the Bank of Canada and the governor of the Bank of England. So he's a very well-known economist, although he's not got any experience really in politics. Mark Carney is perhaps number two. He could become number one. It'll be a competitive race between those two, and there'll be several other candidates. If I may just comment on one other point that was made a moment ago about the difference that might develop as a result of a better relationship between Canada and India over the Khalistan issue. I'm concerned that Indians may get a little too enthusiastic about that, because there are certain things that won't change because the people change. Because there's a new conservative prime minister state, according to the polls, anyway. Let's say that would happen. There is nothing that in Canada a new prime minister can do. Say to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and to the courts, to stop those trials of the 30 suspects that have been named by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, not a political organization, as having been involved in extortion and murder on Canadian soil, as a means of tracking, intimidating, and pressuring a Khalistani suspect in Canada. Those trials will proceed. Those trials may produce extremely damaging information to the Indian diplomats' reputation, even if they're not in court. 6 of them were kicked out of the country and accused of being persons of interest, including the High Commissioner himself. And the RCMP wasn't looking all that up. They've got no axe to grind. They're trying to make up charges. We have been doing a very long and very detailed investigation of the murder of Hardeep Singh Najjar. They have, as you well know, made public those accusations, and also a whole crime wave of coercion, extortion, and murder. And those charges are not just going to disappear because the government changes. It's an independent police, and the courts are independent. And beware
they
of what
would
may
still
come
need to
in those
they
trials.
will still need to produce evidence, and so far we haven't seen any evidence in public domain, at least, that would stand scrutiny in a court of law, perhaps. And let me take that both to Ambassador Karju and to Yashovardhan Azad, both who've dealt with these cases personally at a diplomatic level and at a police level. But to you, Ambassador Karju, do you agree with Terry Milski that even if there's a change as Prime Minister and change of government, whether the Conservatives come in instead of Liberals, Canada-India relations, point one, and point two, especially on the issue of Khalistan, may still remain a sore point between the two countries, especially the investigation?
Well, on Khalistan, I think the Canadian political class with varying degrees needs to become more sensitive to Indian concerns.
Yes.
That is a general proposition. As far as criminal cases is concerned, I have great respect for my friend Terry. But my own diplomatic experience has shown that all these protestations of independence of judiciary and police being independent of and immune of political influence is more theoretical than practical. This is especially when it comes to matters relating to external policy and interstate relations. So, yes, in theory, what Terry is saying is perfectly fine, but a little nudge here and a little nudge there to the chief of police from the Prime Minister's office in all countries, including Canada, works wonders. My friend Mr. Azad may differ from me, but this is the reality.
Okay.
This is what I have personally experienced in my diplomatic career, that all these countries which say that our judiciary is independent, our police is independent, when push comes to shove, when their national interests get involved, then they all find ways of navigating their systems to meet the required ends of their interests and find ways of dealing with things.
Is that also your assessment, Mr. Yashovardhan Azad? As far as Canada-India relations are concerned, a lot depends on one, Canada's action against Khalistanis, which is a big zero. And as far as Canada says, 6 of our diplomats, including the High Commissioner, they are persons of interest. Now, that case will remain, and that will remain a sore point between the two countries.
Well, let me say this, that even if the Conservative government comes after this and they have the same policy, let's go back to the Kanishka crash. Since then, our relations have never been hunky-dory. And since then, if you see, there has been a gradual decline, a gradual slide. The issues are remaining the same. And let me bring another aspect of this, which is very, very troublesome for India, is that despite one of the police commissioners, and I heard and I said it in the last TV debate we had, in which Terry was also there, in which he said that there are extortions being committed by the relatives, by the Khalistani agents in Canada against those people whose relatives are in Punjab. So there is a kind of relations which have been established clearly between the crimes happening in Punjab and being directed from Canada. They also persist. So if the NIA has given a mountain of dossiers over there for extradition, this point will carry on between the Conservative government and our government. And so the relations would be the same. It depends if they try to acquire a fresh approach diplomatically, then things will be different, to overlook these things. Otherwise, I'm sure things would remain the same.
Because Terry Milski, you've written extensively about this. There was intelligence input available with the RCMP about the Khalistani plot to blow up Air India aircraft Kanishk. 320 people were killed. The police did little. The investigations were very sorry. So that really doesn't paint the Royal Canadian Mounted Police or the judiciary in Canada or the political leadership in very good light, sir.
You're absolutely right. And I personally believe that the feeble, to put it mildly, response of the Canadian establishment to include the court system, the justice system, and the Royal Canadian Police and the federal scene and the local police all across the country, the absolute national disgrace. It was quite astonishingly feeble. Clear warnings were ignored, evidence was destroyed, witnesses were allowed to be intimidated and ultimately murdered without the state doing much, if anything, about it. This is certainly a disgrace in my view. However, what I'm saying is that in the present situation, that's all a given, as far as I'm concerned, that Canada totally dropped the ball on Khalistan and to this day indulges Khalistani propaganda, letting them glorify their martyrs, gun-toting terrorists of all kinds, to include the assassins of Indira Gandhi, the mastermind of the Air India bombing, etc., etc. Given all of that history, there is
Okay.
a political scope for Canada, a new prime minister, to say to his counterpart in India that, look, we're going to take a harder line on this propaganda. We're not going to allow the glorification of terrorism. We're going to have new legislation. We're going to make that illegal. That would make a difference. That would be a step forward that Canada definitely should take. However, all I'm saying to you is that Vivek, I respect his point of view. Yes, it's not unheard of, even in pristine, innocent Canada, that a politician may administer a little nudge and a wink, as he puts it, toward chief of police and so forth. It's not going to be a nudge and the wink is not going to get rid of 30 different charges of extortion and murder. Sorry, there are
Fair
8
enough.
different murder charges. There is going to be evidence you don't want to see come out in those trials, even if half of them were somehow swept away by some diplomatic nudge and a wink. The other half would be devastating. The RCMP is not a political organization. I'm sorry if this sounds like a poly. We may have
But
failed dismally in the past with respect to Air India, but on this file, remember, they brought it to the politicians, not the other way around. It was
the
the police who
RCMP
put it to the
continues to
politicians.
fail. The RCMP, with due respect, and I want to bring in Prabjot Singh into this conversation, RCMP continues to fail till date. The fact that you have extortionists roaming around in Canada, plotting murders in Punjab, India submitting dossiers to Canada, the esteemed RCMP is taking no action against the extortionists. They're taking no action against the rapists and murderers and human traffickers in Canada. They're taking absolutely no action against terrorists in Canada. It just shows the RCMP in very, very poor light. And in today's day and age, sir, in a transparent world, the world sees it all. Like we are looking at the British police, how the British system failed their children. The RCMP has failed Canada, Prabjot Singh, haven't they, in ensuring that the Khalistani terrorists are dealt with in Canada, given all the dossiers that India submitted?
Yes, you have a point. You see, the Canadian system doesn't work the way like we think it works. They need evidence. They have the rights, the human rights, and all those things which are attached to. Because though we have an extradition treaty signed with India, Canada, and India, but not many extraditions have taken place. Though
No,
on
but
both
that's because
sides.
Canada gives that fig leaf that India does not accept the Commonwealth, the Queen as head of Commonwealth, and that is why they refuse to extradite the accused in Air India, sir. No, but Canada is also part of the same Commonwealth. Their laws are the same, and there are lawyers in India who read Canadian law. So, I want to bring in just the last 30 seconds I have on this part of the show. I want to bring in Ambassador Karju. Canada has to be as transparent as any other country. It cannot claim to be the white man who knows better law than the brown man. Doesn't work in 21st century world.
I think the Canadians should apply the law equally. They have to take Indian complaints about crime being ordered from Canada very seriously. When it comes to matters, say like the Niger assassination or the Niger murder, they have the thought in my mind recurringly has been that they have people in their custody. I think they have 4 Indians in their custody, but no case has proceeded against them in a court of law. And for these many months, what have they been waiting for? They've made allegations against senior Indian political personalities. They made Trudeau's personal aides holding high office in Canada made these confirmed these allegations. Yet no criminal cases have proceeded. So that brings about doubts, and that brings about a certain sense that the Canadians have been adventurous. They've made claims which they've not been able to back till now.
Okay, clearly this debate continues. Today, the debate does remain on Justin Trudeau's decision to step down. Is he perhaps one of the most unpopular leaders right now in Canada, if not the most unpopular? We'll track that story closely. A series of posts by the CEO of Tesla and social media platform X, Elon Musk, have taken the United Kingdom by storm. Elon Musk has raised the issue of exploitation of thousands and thousands of young, vulnerable British girls by predominantly Pakistani grooming gangs in the United Kingdom over decades, not just months or years, but for decades. And not 1, 2, 20 or 100, but thousands and thousands. And there are some British commentators who say across the United Kingdom, over 40 years, over 1 million British girls were exploited. The number of these young girls, young white girls, some Sikh girls, some as young as 10, 12 and 13, some from very disadvantaged background, were exploited by these Pakistani grooming gangs, and the stories are soul-numbing. What's even more shocking was the response, or the lack of it, of the British administration and governments over decades. Was the reason for inaction or poor action Islamophobia? Were they being too politically correct? Or is the reason far more sinister, as some claim now? We bring you more in this report. A political storm has erupted in the United Kingdom following controversial remarks made by tech billionaire and CEO of X, Elon Musk. The Tesla CEO launched a series of critical posts targeting British Prime Minister Keir Starmer for failing to act decisively in cases involving Pakistani grooming gangs during his tenure as Director of Public Prosecutions. The billionaire said, under Keir Starmer's leadership, rape gangs by men of Pakistani origin were allowed to exploit vulnerable young girls without facing justice. Responding to the criticism, Starmer defended his record, emphasizing his commitment to protecting victims and tackling child sexual exploitation.
Those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible, they're not interested in victims. They're interested in themselves. Those who are cheerleading Tommy Robinson, not interested in justice.
Starmer drew on his experience as chief prosecutor, recalling the successful prosecution of an Asian grooming gang in Rochdale.
Child sexual exploitation is utterly sickening, utterly sickening. And for many, many years, too many victims have been completely let down by perverse ideas about community relations, or by the idea that institutions must be protected above all else. And they've not been listened to, and they've not been heard.
Alarm over Pakistani grooming gangs has been long-standing in Britain. Thousands and thousands of young girls, predominantly white and from disadvantaged backgrounds, have been groomed and raped over several decades. A crime that went relatively unnoticed for far too long. With public anger rising, petitions for a national inquiry are now gaining momentum. Calls for accountability are also intensifying, with some demanding that British Prime Minister Starmer's Labour government address its historical role in the scandal. Musk, who's never shied away from making bold statements, has put pressure on the British government to come clean and take action. But can Musk's attack actually change the political tide in the United Kingdom? Bureau Report, India Today. So British Prime Minister Keir Starmer sees Elon Musk raising the issue of grooming gangs, and those joining in seeking a national inquiry, a far-right conspiracy. Elon Musk, on the other hand, seeks opinion on whether America should liberate the people of Britain from the tyrannical government. He took to social media platform X to say that, and he sought public response on this. But the big issue is, did Britain actually fail as a country to protect its children? Young girls who were gang raped by Pakistani grooming gangs, and they were passed around. They were exploited for decades. They went to the police. These girls went to social service. They went to civil society. They went to their teachers. They went to their parents. But the exploitation continued. Can this be blamed just on Islamophobia? I want to bring in Yashovardhan Azad, former Special Director of Intelligence Bureau and someone who knows policing like the back of his hand. He's done that for decades. And I want to understand from you, sir, is Elon Musk raising a pertinent issue, or is Elon Musk interfering in England's internal affairs when he says there has to be justice, those grooming gangs? There should be a nationwide inquiry, a national inquiry into this.
Well, let me say, Gaurav, at the very outset, that the very fact that Elon Musk's statements gaining currency is because it's representing the public anger of a large majority of the Englishmen. And this has been, gaining ground in the last few months, if you see, through the social media platforms and other places. And there have been many other statements also coming about this Islamophobia or this exploitation. But as far as the child exploitation is concerned, this has become a real public issue in Britain. And you mentioned, the UKPM mentioned about Rochdale, where this scandal was unearthed. There are other places too. He was talking
Rotherham, Telford.
Rotherham, yes, Telford, all these other places. And the system was so well oiled. This is not a part of what you call isolated crime. We call it an organized kind of a crime. And that is why the word used is the grooming gangs. Now, in these grooming gangs, specifically what has been alleged is trafficking, is the use of drugs, alcohol, rape, assault, and the way you gain confidence of these children and exploit them. Now, some of this exploitation has been going on for years, as you've already said. For example, in the case, as you know, of Rotterdam, there were about 1,300 children who were abused. So, yes, point number one is that this is a fact that this has been happening. Number two, Elon Musk has made a statement. Well, you can call it interference in fine tune because this is from some other country, but this is an allegation. This is in the larger good. And yes, there is a call for a National Commission of Inquiry. And I think if something of this extent, this kind of a crime, which is the most heinous, horrible crime, then yes, there is the call for a National Commission of Inquiry is reasonable and should be held, irrespective of who the criminals belong to, whether they are foreigners, whether they are inlanders. And for far too long, these things are under wraps because of various reasons, whether it is, being politically correct or not trying to create interpolation. Even the police doesn't want such serious, scandalous kind of cases being blamed.
But why, when their own daughters are being gang raped and groomed and passed around, did the British police, and I want to ask you this, wear your police hat for a moment. Did the British police, did the British judiciary, did the British system fail Britain's daughters? Because the police should have arrested these Pakistani grooming gangs, prosecuted them, and jailed them for life. You nip it in the bud. When it continues for decades, it becomes the system, and then they have money to pass around.
Actually, Gaurav, one of the first points is that not much evidence is available.
But the girls themselves are crying and going to the police. 12-year-old girls, 13-year-old girls.
Yes, but not all of them. There are some of these cases which are still kept under wraps. Some of the cases have come out. And in fact, the sentences are also very long. They're about 10 to 20 years. So in some cases, actions have been taken, but not on a wide scale as it was expected. So if instead of isolated investigations, if there's a National Commission of Inquiry or Commission, then a lot of these facts will come out and it'll be much, much easier to then carry out the investigations and which can lead to conviction.
So I want to ask you, when Keir Starmer, as Prime Minister of Britain, who was then Chief of Prosecution, if he says that those calling for a national inquiry are playing a far-right game, or words to that effect, he then clearly is being economical with the truth then, that means.
Well, naturally, if he's been the director of public prosecution and during his time a number of cases will come out, that certainly he has to politically defend his stuff. And we exactly don't know how many of such cases would have been unearthed at that particular time, or how many complaints were received and how many were actually. But what I find surprising is that in the last debate where we are talking about the autonomy of the police, etc., the London Metropolitan Police has not come out with any statement. Neither has the Scotland Yard or the other agencies which are there. They should be coming out. And in fact, the other thing, Gaurav, is that one of the most publicized press statements which the police gives, or the annual reports they publish, how much of section or how much of place they have reserved for this kind of crime, which is the most serious and heinous crime. That would be an interesting thing to find out.
Because some of the statements of former police officers which are now viral on social media, some of the debates in the British Parliament, where members of Parliament have also raised this, yes. It was all deemed as a conspiracy theory, and this would indicate, one, either England was very embarrassed about this, they didn't want to talk about it, this was their dirty secret that they didn't want the world to know, even though the world knew. Every system is supposed to have checks and balances. Britain talks to everyone about human rights. Their own daughters, their own children did not have these human rights, whether they were let down by their teachers, their social workers, their society, their police, their judiciary, Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford, city after city. It's a collapse of British society, sir.
In fact, some of the statements which have come out from various individuals, they have been extremely indicting virtually the lawmakers, virtually the policemen and the law enforcement machinery, and even said that there was a kind of what you call censorship of speaking against anything, against the particular religion or particular crime. And that's why the public anger is now exploding. After Elon Musk's statement has come, it has somehow acted as a catalyst now in uniting its various people and the agitationists. And that is why they have been calling for this National Commission for Inquiry.
Let me for a second play the devil's advocate. Is there merit in the criticism that big tech can interfere in internal affairs of any country and divert public discourse, influence governments and change governments, the way we are seeing what's happening in Canada, what's happening in the United Kingdom?
Well, that's a very, very sensitive issue, and I think every country will rise up against any kind of a big tech or any kind of organization taking interest in the other countries, whether it's the elections or it's the governmental setup. But yes, the comments have been coming from various organizations like the NGO, whether it's a big tech, whether it's the IMF. After all, they're making very, very indicting comments on the third world countries and on the other countries. So if Elon Musk has made a comment on the social polity and a kind of a crime which is a heinous crime against children, that is a kind of it has an international impact, because world over, children, even by the United Nations or any other agencies, are considered to be the most innocent, and against whom any kind of a crime would be called extremely heinous, and every step should be taken to control or to prevent in future. And if there has been any kind of a crime, definitely a commission of inquiry.
Oh, absolutely. The truth must prevail, and everyone must do everything they can to protect their children. If they can't protect their future generations, then what is their being there for? Their entire work is now tailor-made for them to ensure that the future generations are better protected, and these Pakistani grooming gangs are dealt with an iron hand. Mr. Yashovardhan Azad, for joining me here on this India Today special broadcast. Many thanks. We'll be tracking the story very closely, but that is all I have time for on this broadcast. Many thanks for watching.